Let me give you a map with two axes: expertise, which is an opposite of ignorance, if you will, and motivation. So this is a map of a magical kingdom. Here in the lower part, we have, in the lower left part, we have a kingdom of goblins. They have low motivation and low expertise. What is the best communication tool here? Stories. Stories will produce higher motivated goblins, which is a very dangerous substance that needs to be handled with care. This is the danger of storytelling. Lower right corner, high expertise, low motivation. These creatures are called elves. They're very wise, not a lot of desire to do anything though. Stories won't work with them. They are far too wise. They will see right through your stories. You have to use numbers, specs, tiny little parameters, things only they could understand. You have to know the elvish language. Goblins are straightforward. They mostly care about, the bling. The secret to communicating with elves is knowing their language and their criteria for decision making. Upper left corner, high motivation, low expertise. Hobbits. Hobbits live here. Hobbits are very rare. They don't come in troves. Very motivated, very well-meaning. Always need some consulting as to where exactly they should throw the bloody ring. What do we use here? Definitely not stories. They have no use for stories. They need a map. Actually, they are highly motivated, so you can throw almost anything at them. Charts, graphs, formulas. They're eager to learn. They desire complex content. Let them have it. Again, very rare creatures. People teaching at educational institutions, I think they overestimate the amount of hobbits in their vicinity. I think they mostly believe their students are hobbits, which is true if you're teaching at Harvard, but unless you're teaching at Harvard, this is probably a mistake. Mostly goblins, with a few hobbits, of course. By the end of the semester, all the hobbits become elves, very knowledgeable and very tired. Finally, upper right corner. Can you guess what's in there? High motivation, high expertise. There's like 8 characters in the whole Lord of the Rings that have both expertise and motivation. And about half of them are evil. Yeah. There's another hidden dimension in this map, good versus evil. Okay, I call these creatures wizards. And a talk with them is always a two-way conversation, never a monologue, always a dialogue. You need to co-create something with them. You throw them a story, they will throw another story at you back. And this is where I believe we are heading as a civilization. I think as we age as a civilization, more and more people become wizards. And wizards, at least as far as I'm concerned, are the most interesting people in the world. I would love to be able to talk to them. And what do you use when talking to them? I think you're using something like this. This is a logical structure of Emikadi's talk. It is called a decision graph or sometimes influence diagram. I did a few of these graphs for a number of talks, and this one is just perfect. It is beautifully constructed, seriously. I mean, the talk, it is very well done. I admire the craftsmanship in planning as well as the masterful execution. So this is how things work for Emikadi. She begins with her first proposition that our nonverbal displays influence other people. So relatively obvious thing to say, but she backs it up with some evidence. Then she says, she says that our nonverbal displays influence how we think and feel. And again, she has some experiments by Fritz Strack to back it up. She then moves a little bit sideways and proposes that there are nonverbal signals of power and dominance. Again, reasonably obvious thing to say, but then she proposes that changing our nonverbal signals is the way to shift the balance of power, which is interesting. I mean, it is probably wrong, but It's an interesting thing to say. This is a problematic statement, but given all the background and her experiments, it doesn't look all that preposterous. And then she strikes the final blow by telling this powerful personal story, pointing out that females and minorities more frequently display signals of submission. And she concludes that the way out of this really abominable situation is to fake it until you make it. Wow, what a journey. These are the confidence levels. Green means good evidence, yellow means shaky evidence, red means very shaky evidence. Now, suppose we mostly care about the truth and don't care much about having 100% confidence. It's a trade-off. You can either have one or another. I think under these circumstances, you would very much like to be able to see something like this. Of course, this is hindsight. I can only assign those colors in retrospect. But I wonder what colors the author of this talk would assign herself. I don't know, something like this maybe? I would argue that this is still very informative, much more informative, in fact, than what we had before, which was an emotional impression and a questionable life hack. And I think we should start doing something like this for the purposes of internal communication, which I think is the least adversarial of all. With sales presentation, there's always this conflict of interest, which probably cannot be overcome in the near future. But for internal communication, probably.